My name's Sarah Mackenzie. I am the Acting Executive Director of Per Capita. After Emma has left us to go and run the Chipley Institute, which we are really excited about. But I just want to, before we begin, to say a couple of things about her. Many of you have known Emma for years. She has been an integral part of Per Capita, actually going way back to Per Capita's existence. And her leadership, or under her leadership, Per Capita has become a trusted and effective voice in the policy space. She has delivered real gains, and you can see her fingerprints on so many policies that our Australian government has been pushing through over their last term. So I don't think that it is a exaggeration to say that Emma Dawson has had her role in changing the country, and we will miss her a lot. She has been a wonderful writer, an excellent thinker, an incredible mentor to me and others at Per Capita, and the work that we will continue doing on will be of the same legacy that Emma Dawson leaves behind, one where we are pushing for equality, social justice and evidence-based solutions to the problems that we face, not just now but into the future. Before we get started today, Jenny would like to say a couple of words. We are of course joined here by Deane and Jenny Macklin. But I'll hand over to you, Jenny, so you can do your thank yous and then we'll get going.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Sarah, and it's great to be here with you and meet with you. Sarah is the granddaughter of what I like to call Jagga Jagga royalty, David Mackenzie and his wonderful partner Barbara. So lovely to see you, David and Barbara, here today. It's very special to me. I want to also join with everyone in acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want everyone to really take a moment to think about why it is that we say this on such significant occasions. It is very important that we think about the traditional owners, the First Peoples of Australia, and acknowledge and thank them for what they do. It's also lovely that this is a John Cain lunch, and we're especially joined by one of John's nieces here today. So thank you so much for joining us. John's electorate of Bundoora, you would all know John, of course, is a previous Premier of Victoria, but his electorate of Bundoora was inside Jagga Jagga. And for me, he was just such a wonderful friend. He was never one to shy away from the jobs that need to be done. He would go out door knocking with me, come in and help get envelopes ready. He was just the most wonderful, generous local person. Going door knocking with him, though, I have to say, meant that you didn't get many doors knocked because, of course, everybody knew him and wanted him to come in for a cup of tea. So I just want to honour him today. So thank you to Per Capita for naming this lunch after him. The other people who are here today that are very, very special to me and get a very big rap in the book is Brian Howe and his partner Renata Howe. Thank you to Brian and Renata so much for coming along today, but really to Brian for everything that you did for me personally. Really a great mentor to me, helped show me what was possible to be done in the federal parliament, and just a huge personal support. So it's great that you're able to both join us today, and those of you who'd like to read about the interview we did with Brian in the book will understand just how significant he was to me, but also of course to Australia. So thank you, Brian, so much. Okay, and thank you, Joel. I'll say more about that later.
Wonderful, thank you. Alrighty, so as I said before, if you haven't got this book and you are dying to get it today, we've got some copies over there. I read it over the last couple of weeks and it's really two books in one in a way. The second, I think, is one of the best manuals for anybody who is wanting to work in policy. But I want to start by asking you both, what was the thing that made you decide to write this book? Why did it become the we'll do it now moment?
Thanks, Sarah, and Joel might like to add to this. For me, after we lost in 2013, I started writing about what we'd have been able to do during our years in government, and it was all a bit boring. And one of the things that happened when I started talking about delivering a couple of big speeches with Joel was that he really drew out of me some of my personal story. Everyone who was already a writer, which I was not, said that when you're doing something like this, you have to give something of yourself, which I was very, very reluctant to do. But Joel and others kept saying to me, well, if you don't, it's just going to continue to be dull. So it was very special that that he did that with me. But the other thing really was that a lot of people kept saying, how did you deliver these big reforms? And that's really the theme of the book. How did we do it? And the interviews that we did with some of the biggest policymakers in Australia was really about that. Not what did you do, but how did you do it? And I think that's why we hope it will be a very useful book.
From a selfish point of view, I'm very interested in how government works and how things are done. And that was a major reason why I did a previous book called Catch and Kill. And when Jenny had asked me if I'd want to help, I saw it as a great example, a great opportunity to learn a bunch of stuff. And the other thing is that my family, we benefit from the National Disability Insurance Scheme. My wife, Kirsten Deane, was a big part of the Every Australian Counts campaign with a lot of other people, obviously, and ran it in the end. And that would not be here without Jenny. And so I was very keen to help produce a book that did justice to Jenny's work.
Thank you very much. So I want to ask you a bit about how things have changed or not changed. You say in the beginning of your book that big policy reform is still possible. It's possible and that it's essential. But these days it feels like everything's under the microscope. You've got gotcha journalism, those sort of things. Do you think that politicians currently have the bravery for big policy reform? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do, and they must, because there are very, very big things that need to be done. As we say in the book, the most significant, of course, is addressing climate change, which is enormously difficult. There are so many very, very cashed up interest groups that are very powerful, both in Australia and around the world. But it's absolutely essential that that task be taken on. I have absolutely no doubt that there are people in the Parliament who have the capacity to address the big changes that are needed. As we say in the book, it's not only possible but absolutely necessary.
Thank you. So going to your rules of policy making, which are brilliant. Is it your second one? Yes, your second one is know your values. Of course, there's lots going on in our parliament, and there's lots going on within each party as well. But I just want to understand from you, how important it is for policy making and government to be informed by some core set of values.
I think it's absolutely essential to know your values, and there's some lovely examples in the book of people who we interviewed who set out how their values influence them. A couple of terrific examples from Bill Kelty, who talks in the interview about how his and Labor's values really determined how it was that Medicare was established. As he said in the book, the Prices and Incomes Accord, the unions could have taken the view that they could have got health insurance covered by big business without any difficulty, maybe with a strike for a week, I think he said, in some of the in the oil industry, I think was his example. But as he said, the values of the union movement were that health should be available to all Australians, not to just those who were fortunate enough to work in big business. And you can hear the value of that comes through from that example. The same from everything that was done to get the carbon price. Greg Combay also talking about the importance of his values and getting the values agreed between those who were on the multi-party committee that was established in 2010, I think it was, to work on the development of the carbon price. So getting the values very, very clear in your development of policy is just so important. Just to give one example from the development of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, I well recall a debate, in fact struggle I might say, now it's a long time ago so I can probably tell this story, when in the Expenditure Review Committee there was a debate about whether or not we should have a means test for access to the NDIS. I was firmly opposed to such a means test. My view was that we were creating a scheme for people with profound disabilities. Many families who have children with profound disabilities, or people who experience profound disability in adulthood, know the economic impact of those profound disabilities, and I did not want them to have to face a means test, even though I'm in favour of means testing in the social security system. I don't think it was the same, and of course we had that debate, or we have that debate still sometimes with Medicare, because not everybody believes that Medicare should be universal. So some of these value debates and fights are absolutely critical. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, the universal is really an interesting Labor value, and we see it again with universal childcare. So it's great we're still having those debates, which reflects, you know, the values that need to be fought for.
Thank you. So I was interested in the book about timing and the role timing plays to good policy, or not good policy, but whether policy can have enough time to get its roots into the ground. And I wanted to, so when you were talking about superannuation early on in the book, you were talking a little bit about the timing, but also the luck that comes with that. And you know, had X, Y, and Z not happened in a certain way, things could have been very different. But you say something in there, which is, you know, why would you waste political capital? Why would you waste political capital fixing something that isn't broken? And it really got me thinking about those large policies where we are not just being reactive, but trying to think about what we're going to need into the future. And I wondered if you had some comments on that, about how to balance that timing, you know, being able to go hard when you need to, but not waiting until you're just fixing problems.
Thanks very much. I think I give Brian the credit for, Brian Howe, the credit for telling me years and years ago that it's all about luck and timing. And I don't know that that's true. There are many other things you need to do in delivering big policy reform, but luck and timing really is a big part of it. Brian tells a story in the book about how he was down in Wollongong one day just before an election campaign. He gets a call from Bob Hawke, who was Prime Minister, and the PM says to him, "I want you up in Kirribilli. I need to be more generous in one of my policies. I want to give you some extra money for that families policy you've been thinking about." And Brian gets on the phone to one of his staff, and they work out what they think is a fair ask, more than Hawke had in mind. And because one of the other great things that Brian always did, and he really impressed on me, was to always have done the deep intellectual work so that when the call comes, when the time comes, you're ready with the proposal to put forward, as he was on this occasion. And he and Hawke were able to deliver some of the biggest improvements to family support that the country's ever seen, and we should, particularly families who are really struggling, have a lot to be grateful for to Brian's work. But a lot to do with luck, timing and preparation. Do the intellectual work as well.
On that further, so there's two other rules. There's the know your history and harness intellectual support. In Australia, we have think tanks, we have some sort of other independent research centres. Not a whole lot though, and certainly not to the level that you see in the UK and the US. And I wanted to know from your own experience, you're working within research centres, but then also as a parliamentarian, a politician, what the value of research centres like Per Capita, but the others are, and how they sort of service the political system.
I do think that organisations like Per Capita are just so critical to the broad policy debate. And if I can just add my thanks to all the work that Emma Dawson's done. She sent her apologies to me this morning. She wasn't able to join us today, but to have Per Capita and many other organisations, CPD are well represented here today, the Brotherhood of St Lawrence represented here today, just terrific organisations that are part of the national debate, and who are able to say things that need to be said in ways that members of Parliament can't necessarily say, and can really push the debate forward. So I think it's very important. If I can also say, for me, from the left, you might think this is a bit strange, but I found the Productivity Commission incredibly useful. The report they did for me for paid parental leave was outstanding, and also for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Both were really first-class pieces of intellectual work, and really gave me the capacity to win the debate in Cabinet, because I had a lot of that hard work behind me. The other great thing with the way the Productivity Commission goes about its inquiries, and I might say this too, I know that CPD, for example, uses a different approach, so I think it's impressive when organisations use different approaches to consult, but the Productivity Commission really has a very formal but nevertheless inviting way to bring people into their thinking. And some of the people they got to tell their stories about how bad some employers were, maybe still are, to young women having babies, having to take the baby into work, because they needed to work, got no paid leave, just how hard it was for those young mothers really brought home exactly how difficult it was. And it was the same with the NDIS, wasn't it, Joel, that there were so many examples from the work that the Productivity Commission did, also the Every Australian Counts campaign. I suppose just while I'm talking about influential pieces of work, the other great thing that needs to be done if you're doing big reform is to have the benefit of great campaigners. Nothing better than the Every Australian Counts campaign. Absolutely outstanding. I think they had a cup of tea with every single member of Parliament and all around Australia and convinced people that now was the time. Did you want to add anything?
Oh, yeah. Just the other thing that strikes me is the importance of having a strong public service, which, the Albanese government's, sort of building up. I think that really makes a massive difference. The thing that was interesting also in the book, I think Brian Howe was talking about how he brought in outside people. I mean, Jenny was one of them, but also people like Bettina Cass, from academia to work within the public sector and really, and that was something also the Brax-Brumby government did as well. They brought people in, and I think creating a bit of an internal contest for ideas is also really important.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in the 10 rules for good policy, when I was reading through them, and I think it probably sits somewhere in opportunity or timing, but I wanted to ask you a bit about this. So I know this was past your time, but the Fair Work Act, or the amendment, the Secure Jobs Better Pay, I've been reflecting on that a lot recently, and it's really struck me that the part that I paid very little attention to when it was going through, and actually not just me, Bill's Digest, the report from the Senate committee, the submissions to that, nobody talked all that much about changing the objective of the Act and changing how the Fair Work Commission, or what the Fair Work Commission could take into account for determining the minimum wages and modern awards. But the outcome of those changes around gender equality there, and a couple of words, has meant that we have seen a whole lot of decisions and changes that will see wages in female-dominated industries and occupations shoot up. As far as Secure Job Better Pay, it's nailed it. And so I was thinking, how do you know, like, when you need to do, like with the NDIS, and really build a big community support, and Bill Shorten said act like a union. They absolutely did, and I think that's why they smashed it. But when do you know when you have to do that, and when you have to just maybe be opportunistic or like a little sneaky? 11th rule, be sneaky.
Well, Tanya Plibersek really nailed this, I think, in the interview that we did with her for the book, and the way she expressed it is know when to be patient and know when to put your foot down. And I think that's a very good way of putting it. You do need to know when to be patient, when to do more work, because you may not have the support that you need. In the Expenditure Review Committee, you may find that if you wait a bit, you'll get more support. It may be clear to you, as it was to me, that you need to do more work, that without, it was made very clear to me, for example, that if we didn't get the Productivity Commission to do the work for the NDIS, we wouldn't be having an NDIS. Have you got that message clear, Jenny Macklin? It was pretty much how the message was delivered to me. So I think you just need to use your political judgment. One of the very, very difficult decisions that we had to make in thinking about how we would fund the NDIS was deciding that we would increase the Medicare levy. That is an increase in a tax. And this was at a time when we were having a huge fight with Tony Abbott about a carbon price. And so the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, and Wayne Swan, the Treasurer, and I just met together day after day after day, trying to think about, well, at what level should we pitch the increase in the levy? How much do we need? How much would we give to the states to help them pay for the NDIS? It was a very, very difficult decision. We took a lot of time about it. Did lots of pieces of work to think about the implications because, of course, people were going to pay that tax, and we wanted that to be fair. Another example of your values coming to work, because we didn't want people who were struggling to have to pay more than we really needed them to. So sometimes, you need to take that time, do the extra work. Sometimes you can see your cabinet colleagues circling around, not necessarily supporting what you want to do, and you might just wait a bit.
The interview that Jenny has with Julia Gillard is well worth the price of entry, and they talk about this sort of stuff. And just quickly on the interviews, I sat in on them, and they were great interviews. Because people were talking to Jenny, and they said stuff they otherwise wouldn't have said in ways that they wouldn't have said. So they were really great interviews. And the one with Julia, there are several moments in there that were quite extraordinary.
Mm. The same with Wayne, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, so because the three of us worked so closely together on so many difficult issues, and to be able to draw them both out and to hear their views, which are reflected in the book, I hope you enjoy and get something out of it.
Yeah, it was incredible reading those interviews. They were, I was saying before, you really feel like you're in the room, and it's an excellent way to go into detail about what you are talking about at the beginning of that part of the book. I've got a couple more and then we'll open to the room because I'm sure that there are some excellent questions in here, but we do only have one mic, so we're going to work it out. It's great. I was saying before, independent theatre background, got this, we'll work it out. But I want to ask you, Jenny, what you're most proud of in your political career. It might not be the biggest thing, but something that you go back and you go, yeah, maybe that was hard, but that was bloody worth it.
It's actually hard to choose among the very, very big reforms because in their different ways they have made a difference to so many people's lives. And so, of course, I still meet, and in fact, just the other day was speaking with somebody who told me she had benefited both from paid parental leave and the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So that's pretty special. But we lifted around 1 million pensioners out of poverty with the pension changes, and it's hard not to think about that. Although I must say some of the pensioners said to me, you know, when we'd go around the country talking with pensioners, they'd say, now, Jenny, thanks very much for that pension rise, but really, I've given the money to my granddaughter. I'd say to them, well, don't tell Wayne Swan. But when you know that for many people it's made such a huge difference to their lives, it's hard not to feel very, very happy about that.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask, I'm going to squeeze one more in before my final question, because I want to know about your time in Parliament. There was a large increase around the amount of women who were sitting in both houses, and a big part of that had to do with the AA rules that came in, 30 years ago, which you were clearly involved in. Yeah. And what we did see is is the Australian Labor Party's parliamentary party from the 1996 election just absolutely skyrocket to a point where we now have, we are looking about to open our first gender equal parliament in the history of Australia, which is brilliant. And a lot of that comes from, obviously, the work that women within the Australian Labor Party did, not just to put women into parliament, but to put women into positions of power within the party, leadership positions, so that the culture changed. But within parliament, how did that change the sorts of things that were on the government's agenda, or where they were on the government's agenda, through your time going from when it was even lower than the Liberal Party to we're over 50% now?
It's been an extraordinary change. When I went in 1996, well, it was a terrible defeat, so our numbers were very, very low. There are only 4 of us on the Labor side, 4 women in the House of Representatives, so it's pretty poor. When you think of the change now, I mean, we have had an extraordinary victory, but so many women have come into the parliament, and there's no question in my mind it's because of the quotas, the quota decision that we made back in the early 90s, and it was hard fought. Don't let anyone tell you that, apologies to all the men present, but the men did not give up their power without a fight. And so I give a lot of credit to those who were so important in that battle. I remember that us all dancing around at the national conference when it happened, but there's no question that until the Libs make the decision to introduce quotas, I don't think they will be able to address the problem they have with female representation. It just won't happen. So.
We just put up a
short sorry, I didn't answer the second part of your book.
I'd like to come back to it, but we just put up a short blog on Per Capita's website about that, and looking into whether, you know, we consolidate that progress with legislated quotas like we see in lots of other countries, and, you know, is that the path to go down? It doesn't necessarily deal with the held seats, winnable seats, those sort of things that we know happen with AA in the ALP, but a step, perhaps. But yes, I will take you back to that question, how it impacted what was on the agenda, or where it was on the agenda, or how policy was approached by the government.
Well, I think you can really see the difference now. When the Prime Minister was asked during the election campaign what was the issue, the policy issue that he was so looking forward to implementing if he was successful. We now know he's been very successful. And as Joel mentioned, he said universal childcare. Well, I don't really think that would have been the case back in the day. And when there weren't so many women in the parliament, I think there has just been such a huge shift that these issues are absolutely fundamental to the way that young women live their lives. I mean, the other we saw during the election campaign was the huge backlash to the Liberals' suggestion that they might get rid of working from home. I mean, we are grandparents now, and we often have to go and help look after the grandchildren when they're sick. But the parents are often at home, working from home, because that's the only way they can manage the care of their little children and doing their jobs. Two really relevant policy issues to how families work today. So I have absolutely no doubt that it has a huge impact. The example you used, Sarah, of the changes to the Fair Work Act, fantastic example. The equal pay decisions for childcare and aged care workers. I mean, these are fundamental changes that are affecting thousands and thousands of women's lives, and all for the better.
Oh, no.
Well, my last one is for both of you. Now, I know that every generation has its own struggles. I'm in my early 30s, and I'm definitely part of a cohort of people who I think are feeling pretty disillusioned in politics. I'm not, I'm an eternal optimist. I was trained by Emma Dawson. However, I get it, right? We're in our 30s and we live in suburbs that used to be, you know, working class suburbs of Richmond and Fitzroy, and there are 0 affordable houses in our area. That line between having a house and not having one, having a home and not, is feeling so thin for people even who are professionals or, you know, have full-time jobs. So I do understand my friends who feel disillusioned in politics and change and the future. And I wanted to ask you both what you would say about looking forward to the future, if there's anything inspiring.
Well, I hope we've shown today and also through the book that you can make big change. You can get involved in politics and deliver change that improves the lives of people who need it most. But also there's big change that's absolutely necessary. I mentioned climate change at the beginning of this discussion. We could also be talking about housing affordability, and you could see during the election campaign that housing was such an important part of the campaign. So I think that those who are our leaders today, I'll be politically biased of course, in the Labor Party really understand exactly the point that you're making, just how critical it is that that people are able to get a roof over their heads, that addressing homelessness is absolutely fundamental, affordable housing, and then support for those who want to be able to buy their own homes. So I think you can see from the priorities that the Prime Minister had in this election campaign that housing is right up there close to the top.
I'd say anything is possible, and if you don't believe it, ask my wife. Because the Every Australian Counts campaign came from 0 to 100,000 people. It took disability from out in the policy outhouse to the very centre of government, and it did that. And it took it from, this is an idea that came literally from the grassroots, and Jenny's the one who made it happen, you know, in Canberra. But it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible. It's not impossible. And if you don't try, you'll never know.
Good place to finish.
Well, thank you. We do have a bit of time for, yes, questions from the audience. I'm just thinking how we would do this with one mic. We might try if you can stand up. And, yeah, and I'll repeat it for the stream though. So yeah.
Thank you, Jenny and Joel, for writing the book, and Joel for encouraging Jenny to share the personal anecdotes. That definitely add to the warmth and engagement as a reader. My question is, you make a comment, Jenny, in the forward about 6 years in power. If you think 6 years in power is a poor return for 26 years of preparation, you're wrong on 2 counts. And you go on to say, you know, don't get me wrong, I would have loved another 6 years in power, but that decision wasn't up to me. So my question is, you know, if you'd had another 6 years, what would you have liked to have done? And what were the barriers to that at the time that didn't let you get to that?
So just for the stream, that was about to
question.
Jenny, and it was a great question, but it was, if you had another 6 years in Parliament, what would you have done?
Thanks very much, Hutch. And of course, the last part of your question, which I answer in the book, is, well, it wasn't up to me. The voters really decided, and we made quite a mess of our time in government politically by having the battles between the 2 prime ministers, and the Australian people marked us down for it. They marked us down very heavily. So the Australian people made that decision, and frankly we deserved it. as to what else I would have done, so immediately after the defeat, I did some work with a whole range of people, including Travis McLeod, actually. It's when we first met, I think, Trav, when I decided to try and pick myself up after the 2013 loss and do some work on inequality and how to address inequality in Australia, which I did. And so there's some suggestions in that work about how we could address inequality in Australia. Unfortunately, we are and continue to be far, far too unequal. As I say in the book, one of the other areas that I'd like to see a lot more progress is addressing poverty in Australia. I think it's just disgraceful that so many people in Australia live in poverty in such a wealthy country. Trav and I are on the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee, and so we do advise the Treasurer and the Minister for Social Security or Social Services on what needs to be done. So we're still working on how to address poverty and what should be done. So yes, I had quite a bit and of course we had the shocking budget of 2014 that Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey gave to the country, and so I had a huge battle against them to try and stop the cuts to pensions in particular. So yes, there would have still been a lot to be done, and still is.
Yes, there's a question over here. I'll make my way around it. I know I've got my back to you.
Hi, Jenny. Andrew Hudson from the Centre for Policy Development. It's a good follow-on. I guess I think the $10 billion question in not-for-profit policy institute circles is how do we ensure this government has an ambitious policy reform agenda in its second term and doesn't rest on its laurels. We saw in the first term that it occasionally did have a tendency to be perhaps not as ambitious as it could be. So I guess the question is, how do we, what advice do you have for pushing this government to be ambitious and implement some of the big ideas, whether it's the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee policy ideas or some of those other big ideas, or even universal childcare? Right? There's an awful lot more that needs to be done to realise this. So how can we push the government to be ambitious?
Well, I actually think they are very ambitious. So I don't agree with that view that's often put. The fact that... so I think the changes, for example, that Mark Butler is pursuing in health, I mean, this too is an extraordinary complex area of public policy, and the way in which he is going about bringing new ways of delivery in these urgent care clinics is very, very, in policy terms, I think, very, very clever. But the way he's also helping, especially those who are very disadvantaged with poor health, with the changes to the cost of pharmaceuticals, for example, I think is also very, very significant. So as for childcare, I should declare that I do help you guys out a bit on the questions around universal childcare, and there is a lot more to be done. But one of the big achievements is the government has already announced and legislated that they will get rid of the activity test, which is one of the most unequal policy measures that the Morrison government had introduced. So some of these changes are significant. There is a lot more to be done, but I do think that we're seeing some very, very big reform already and an appetite for more.
Super. We've got a question online.
Yep, this is from James Scott online. He's asking, how do we adapt and modernise our constitution to see it more as a work in progress rather than something that's cast in stone? A bit outside my area of expertise, really.
So I don't know if you want to say anything about the Constitution.
I'll leave that to you, Jenny.
James, it's really outside my area of understanding, but if I can just say something about the loss of the referendum on the voice, obviously devastating for those of us who really wanted to both support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have a voice and to have a voice in the Constitution, but also from the Aboriginal people that I know and that I know well, they've just found the no vote, to be quite devastating. And so I think it's been a very, very hard and very sad time, particularly for Aboriginal people. On the bigger constitutional questions, I think I might leave that to those who are more expert than I.
We'll do more questions over here, but for James online, we were doing some thinking about this last year at Per Capita about whether we have that referendum muscle, and if we need to do a little bit of exercise with that muscle, perhaps by having more regular referendums around election times. It's just as an idea. We're a think tank. We can come out with big ideas. You can shoot them down later. But yeah, perhaps might be something to have a bit of a think about, as we see in other states, getting that muscle going again. So doing a referendum isn't weird. It was my first and the first of many of my peers. So alrighty, questions over this side. Yes, over here.
Oh, hi. My name's Penny Bold. I'm from Australian Unity. I think I know the answer to the question, but I'm putting it out there because it's top of mind. But have you been surprised to the negative reaction to the super tax on balances over $3 million in the last couple of weeks? I can't believe we've gone from a cost of living crisis focus to seemingly now protecting this big super pile of money that I think sort of almost in a way perhaps getting too big and too powerful. And just think this would be more thoughts on that.
Did you want to repeat?
Yeah. So it's about. So this is for the people online. It is about your thoughts on the super tax and how that plays with the cost of living.
I'm not sure that there has been such a big response, really. Maybe inside the super industry, but I don't know that the ordinary person in the street is very worried about it, given their super holdings are nowhere near $3 million. So I support what the government's doing. I think it's an example of fairness. If ever you wanted an example of people showing their values, that's a good example. So I'd be surprised if many Australians are worried about it.
And any more questions on this side?
Yep. Okay. Great. One.
You indicated that grassroots is a great way to start with developing policy. But I'd like to know what role you think in professional lobbyists, because quite often you hear things and you think, where did that come from? Because it wasn't discussed at the grassroots level, and yet it comes apparently out of the blue.
So that was about grassroots developing policy, but also what you thought on the role of lobbyists and when ideas seemingly come out of nowhere.
There's certainly fantastic examples of big campaigns, and as Joel and I have indicated, the Every Australian Counts campaign was wonderful, and it really did come from very small beginnings. The other wonderful campaign that I remember that had a big influence, not just on me but on our government at the time, was the campaign that pensioners ran for an increase in the pension. I don't know if you remember, down at Flinders Street Station, we had pensioners taking their tops off, wearing no more than their bras, on top that was, and I can assure you it had a very big impact. And I mean, that was a hugely difficult change for me to get through the Expenditure Review Committee. I think the total cost from memory was about $16 billion. So you can tell nearly 20 years later, I can still remember because it was very, very tough to get that increase. But the campaign itself was very grassroots. You're right that there are lots and lots of lobbyists in that swirl around in Parliament House. One of the ministers that they never really bothered with was me, because I was the minister essentially for Social Security, and I really didn't have much to do with the groups of people that they were interested in. So I was largely spared from lobbyists.
Do we have any more questions? We'll take one more. Yep.
Jenny, thank you so much for this. Just compelling, and I'm in the queue for your book, so I appreciate this, and Joel, thank you. We're still operating under the shadow of this idea that government is a problem. I'm still live in the 1980s, so I'm finding it difficult to, I still haven't made the adjustment. How can we change the narrative that government is the solution? Words that came out from a colleague in the States. Government isn't in Washington, distant in a bubble. Government is the person with a disability at the end of the street, the old person, whatever, whatever. Government is close to us. How can we in Australia change that narrative to a positive so we don't, as a knee-jerk, outsource our services?
That is a great question. I would just repeat it for the live stream. So it is about how we change the narrative around government for the, if I'm paraphrasing, but really so that when we are thinking about our services, the first thought isn't that you don't trust the government and that it could go to somebody else, and that we don't take government out of our lives.
It is a really, really great question, and I hope the book helps in a little way to demonstrate to people that you can do big things that benefit the Australian people in the Parliament. I think too much of the commentary is that that's not the case. As you will hear from Joel and from me, we're both very optimistic that it's not like that. And I hope all the different stories and interviews in the book demonstrate that that's true. It really needs to be said over and over again just how important it is that our democracy is, that our capacity to bring about these big changes through the Parliament are possible. Go on.
I'm thinking of something more direct than that. It's perverse for someone to stand for Parliament on the basis that they think government is the problem. We need to challenge at that sort of basic level. That's my question.
Yes. Well, I don't want to get too personal against our opponents today, but I agree with you. It is perverse to stand for Parliament and then say government's not the way to bring about change. That is a bit odd. But that's what some people believe, and some people do believe that governments should, as they describe it, get out of our lives. And it's not that I think that government should tell you what to do. I don't think that, but I think that there are so many important ways in which governments can help, and there are also so many huge issues, climate change being, in my view, the most important, that requires government to address, that without government these huge changes really can't be acted upon. But you're right, that's not the view of everyone, and that's the nature of democracy, isn't it? That we're all able to come together, and I'm just pleased they don't have the numbers.
Thank you so much, Jenny and Joel. Can you please all join me in thanking everybody. We will be having another lunch next month. We will have Liam Byrne talking about his new book, No Greater Power, A History of Union Action in Australia, which I think is being launched at Trades next Thursday as well. I'm really looking forward to reading
I've already got a
so-
copy.
Oh, you've already got a copy. Yeah, well, that's very cool. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to say a couple of words on behalf of Per Capita about somebody who I appreciate is probably a friend to a lot of you. But we just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Grace Matthews, who was a dear friend of Per Capita. And offer our heartfelt condolences to Iola and the family. He was obviously truly a giant of Australian politics, and his contributions to public policy and to our country have been enormous. For Per Capita itself, his wisdom, his advice and his experience, they are weaved into the fabric of our work. His drive for fairness and justice is something that we aspire to do every day. We had Iola come and speak about her book last year at one of our John Cain lunches, Grace Matthews, A Life in Politics. It's a wonderful book, and I would recommend anybody who hasn't read it to have a read. It tells an excellent story. In that book, Grace reflected on his final years, and he said, others will have to take up the fight now. And I, as a young person in public policy, along with Per Capita, will be part of that. And yes, I just wanted to extend our condolences, especially to everybody here today that would have been very good friends with Grace.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, that will be us for today.